Hi, I am Rebecca. I am the psych coach, and today I am going to be talking to you about how to influence people. Influencing people is something that's desirable, isn't it? It's nice to think you've got a bit of power or indeed control or influence over people. And the idea of this video isn't to talk to you about how to be manipulative, but rather it's going to talk to you, or I'm going to talk to you about some learnings that have been taken from social psychology, in particular taken from the field of sales. And I'm going to talk about how you can employ some of these techniques in your day-to-day life to try and get what you want more, to try and influence people to do what you want more. This isn't a way of getting into people's brains because we simply can't do that. But it's just about what research says about the impact we can have on people when we are trying to influence them and how. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is the rule of reciprocation. What is that, I hear you ask? Well, the rule of reciprocation is pretty simple. It's when an act of kindness is done towards us, we feel a compulsion to do an act of kindness in return to the other person. Now, that's not necessarily straight away. It doesn't mean that if someone does something kind for you, you want to respond straight away. But research does suggest that when someone has done us a favour, when someone has been kind to us, that really registers in our brain and almost goes down as a bit of a debt, a bit of an, oh, I owe them. And that I owe them feeling can last years. Maybe you can tap into a sense of that now. Maybe you can think about who is it you feel that you owe something to, or perhaps you can think about who owes something to you. But the rule of this is that actually, if we do something nice to someone, people are often inclined to do something in return. The rule of reciprocation. So that means that if you want people to do things for you, what do you have to do? Things for them. Now, it's not about being really obvious about it and saying, I'm doing this for you, so in turn you do things for me later. But actually, you need to trust the fact that being kind to people, doing favours for people, will come back to you as a favour. Remember the rule of reciprocation, try and act on it, and then watch what favours come back to you. And sometimes that may mean needing to be really explicit and saying, would you mind doing this for me? Because you know that you've done a favour for them, and because that person is somewhat indebted to you, they may do something back for you when you ask them. The second rule of influence that I'm going to talk about is the art of contrasting. If you want something done for you that might seem like quite a big favour, there's less chance of you getting that favour met if you ask for it outright. If you ask for it outright and it's quite a big favour, people are inclined to think, oh, I'm not quite sure I want to do that. However, if you ask for something really big and then contrast it with what your actual favour is, people will be inclined to say yes. Let me give an example of that. So a number of years ago, students were asked if they would take out a group of young people who were socially incredibly difficult, needed a huge amount of management and may not necessarily be safe in the company of the people who were being asked to look after them. Of course, up in the high 80s of people who were asked to look after this group of very challenging young people said, no, thank you. Then what happened is another group of young people, or another group of students in this case, another group of students were asked exactly the same question. Will you take out a group of young people who aren't particularly reliable, they behave really badly and you may not be safe around them? But before they were asked that, they were asked, would you be prepared to commit to 2 hours of community work where you work with a group of young people for a minimum of 2 years? Well, what happened? People said no to that one, but suddenly the other favour that was being asked upon them seemed quite reasonable. And suddenly the percentage of people that said yes to that went right up into the mid-50s. So it just goes to show that how you ask for something and the likelihood of you getting it is hugely influenced by how you frame it. Now, the key here is to not ask for something completely absurd initially, because that just removes someone's desire to help if they think you're going to be that outrageous, you're going to ask something so silly. So you've got to keep it within the realms of possible, but still within the realms of not desirable to do. And then that's when you come in with your relatively big favour, yet by contrast, it seems pretty small. So remember the importance of contrasting when it comes to asking people what you want them to do. And the third way of influencing people is acknowledging favours that you've done for people. Often if we do something for someone, we tend to think nothing of it. We'll say, oh, it was nothing, no worries at all. If someone says, thank you so much for having helped me, thank you so much for having assisted me when my car broke down. Thank you for having, given me a nice meal because I had been locked out of my house. Often we're inclined to minimise those things and say, it was nothing at all, totally fine, it was a pleasure, don't worry about it. But actually, research suggests that when we say to someone, I'm sure you would do the same for me, it lodges in their brain and makes them more inclined to act in a favourable way towards you in the future. So remember that. If you do an act of kindness, instead of minimising what you've done, when you receive gratitude for it, say, I'm sure you would do the same for me if I needed some help. And by doing that, you're buying yourself a favour for the future. It will log in someone's brain. So remember, it's about the rule of reciprocation, where when we do nice things for people, they're compelled to want to do nice things for us. The sense of being indebted is a long-lasting one. That it's about contrasting, where you've got a favour to ask that might be a big one, but you contrast it with something that's even bigger because suddenly what you're asking for seems more desirable. And that you don't minimise the behaviours that someone is thanking you for, or the favours that you've done towards someone, or the goodwill you've extended towards someone. And you don't say, it was nothing at all, but instead you say, I'm sure you'll do the same for me if ever I need help. And that way you're buying yourself a favour for the future. These techniques are taken from social psychology. Like I say, some of these are used within the sales field. They're used in the fields of persuasion and influence. But these are things you can use day to day to try and get more of what you want from your life. If you've enjoyed today's tips, please do hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will give you plenty more tips on how you can use psychology on a day-to-day basis.